Good afternoon and welcome to Law Power Hour. I hope everyone's enjoying the weather and staying cool. Today I have the Honorable Deborah Thomas with me today. Your Honor, thank you for coming again.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
You know, she is one of the most vigorous advocates in this state for the rights of the citizenry. And I take my hat off to her. I don't have one. She has one on. But in all sincerity, she's a proponent of the expungement program. And today, we're going to talk about another issue that's very, very dear to her heart. I understand that you're seeking the nomination for the Michigan Supreme Court.
I am. It's a confusing process for people because the way that it's done, you have to be nominated by a political party to be a candidate for the Supreme Court. But once you get the nomination, you're not listed with the political party that nominated you.
No, that's because judges run on a nonpartisan ticket.
All judges are on the nonpartisan tickets. So if you're nominated for the position by the Democrats, then people think you're going to be listed with the Democrats. But that's not the case. And so they don't always know that when you vote for judges, and it's all judges, you have to go to the nonpartisan section of the ballot.
So the most important thing is when you go to the ballot, read the ballot completely and be thorough and go all the way through the ballot when you vote.
I always tell people that I believe, and maybe I'm, biased because I'm in the courts, but I think people should vote for the judges first. They should vote the nonpartisan section of the ballot. It may be on the back. You may have to turn it over. But if you are consistently vote for one party or another, you're not going to forget to vote for your party. But you may forget to vote for the judges. So if you start with the judges and you have in the front of your mind, I want justice in the courthouse. I want to make sure that things are fair and reasonable. Then when you finish voting for the judges on the nonpartisan ballot, when you start choosing candidates for legislative positions, you're still thinking, I want fair. I want fair legislators. I want fair laws. And then when you vote for the executive branch, you want to make sure that those laws are administered in a fair and reasonable way. So if you start with voting the nonpartisan ballot for the judges, then you want to vote for justice in all three branches of government.
Now, in terms of the Supreme Court, I think most of the people in this state really don't understand the function of the Supreme Court. It's a little more than just deciding cases, isn't it?
It really is. I think too often we've given a narrow view of just everything that the Supreme Court does. When you start talking about the trickle-down theory, when we talk of the Supreme Court, the major decisions on how the court is going to function, what programs are going to be held in the court, which ones are going to be financed, how attorneys and judges are going to be reviewed, should there be an issue with their services, court rules, procedure, all of this is monitored, created, modified by the Michigan Supreme Court.
Now, Michigan Supreme Court is the court of last resort when it comes to the issues of conduct on the part of attorneys and judges, isn't it?
Yes, it is. If a grievance is filed and a person is not pleased with the outcome, they appeal. And that appeal ultimately goes before the Michigan Supreme Court. So if an attorney is disbarred, if a judge is removed from the bench, those decisions are made at the highest level of last resort is with the Michigan Supreme Court.
Now, you can't get to the Supreme Court to argue a case if you're a claimant on either side, the plaintiff or the defendant, unless you file a petition with the court. Is that correct?
You file a petition for review. The court does not take every case. All right. Sometimes they'll look at the petition and they'll say that no, there's not an issue here. That we're going to just affirm. They will select the cases that they think are an issue of importance, sufficient that it may have an impact across the state. And so they pick and choose the cases.
Does the Supreme Court have a right to pass administrative rules that affect the conduct of lawyers?
That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. They do. And years ago, now, maybe now, there was a time when lawyers could not advertise. They were not allowed to go on television and make commercials and have ads in the newspaper and broadcast across the radio. And there was a suit that was filed on that issue, and it went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, as a matter of fact. But that type of conduct, even in terms of what's proper in advertising, all right? Because just because you can advertise doesn't mean you can guarantee you're going to win no matter what. So the Supreme Court can say that that is not proper and can sanction that behavior.
And likewise, does the Michigan Supreme Court have a right to pass rules related to the conduct of lawyers in seeking out new clients? For example, those who've been injured in automobile accidents.
There has been ongoing back and forth about if a person is injured and they're under the influence of drugs that the hospital has prescribed. They may be in pain, and a lawyer shows up at the hospital bed and says, "Sign here." And whether or not an individual should be safe and protected from having to, because just hiring a lawyer is a legal decision. All right, that's a legal decision.
Well, you have to sign a contract.
You got to sign a contract. And so the question becomes, should a person be protected? Part of the issue is that when a person is in the hospital, they may want to see a lawyer. They may think estate planning would be the appropriate thing to do about now. So who screens the purpose for which the attorney is there? There's the problem of attorney-client right of privacy. So the attorney may come in and says, okay, well, I've been requested, they want guardianship papers, or they want a will drawn up. And who knows what other papers are being signed, if any, during that conversation.
But don't you think they should have specific rules for individuals and not contacting victims of accidents for a number of days to let things settle down after the accident? Because the victim is already suffering as a result of the accident.
I think it would be professional and courteous. I think it would be a type of behavior that you would like for attorneys to display. But then a lot of people say I'm old school. And proper protocol, people are at a stage in this day and age when they want to know what is protocol at all. But yes, in my old school, proper protocol way, I think it would be the gracious, conscientious thing to do.
You'd agree with me then that individuals who are the victims of accidents are entitled to some privacy?
I think that they should be allowed an opportunity to heal and then make reasonable, informed decisions. I don't have a problem with that concept at all.
Now, your work in expungement is another issue that I want to ask about. Who sets the guidelines for that, the legislature or the Supreme Court?
The laws regulating expungement are set by the legislators. However, the legislators are responsive to the citizens. It is, if the citizens make it an issue that they want addressed, and they want it addressed in a certain way, and they push that with the legislators, they get changed. If you sit back and just wait for the wind to blow your way, it's going to be a long wait. I started doing expungement forms over 14 years ago. And I have told people at every forum, if you want to change, if you think that it's too restrictive, if you think it's overly bearing, you need to raise your voice. You need to contact your legislators. I've seen substantial change in the law in the last, over the 14-year period. I believe that there are changes that should yet be made.
Now, you're putting an expungement fair on in a couple of weeks, aren't you?
The first Saturday in August, I will be holding an expungement forum right here in Detroit. It's going to be at UAW Local 22, which is on Michigan Avenue near Clark Street. And we start at 2 o'clock sharp.
Now, with the forthcoming presidential election coming up, in Michigan, isn't it true that returning citizens, felons, can vote?
And those who didn't go anywhere but have a felony can vote. And it's critical. It's critical. Michigan, we convicted felons can vote. That is not true in every state. If we don't make our voice known, if we don't vote, then we could end up with people who will be elected who will take away that right to vote. It's kind of like use it or lose it. And too often people have misinformation. They need to register and they need to vote. They have issues. They should elect people who understand and will address their issues.
Now, do you need to be expunged to vote?
No.
Because that's always a consideration. You know, a lot of felons won't register to vote because they think that they have to be expunged. Did you know that?
No, not in Michigan. And I can tell you another thing that has happened. I've run into people who have relocated from states. They may have served time in one of the states where they could not vote. And they think that because they've come to Michigan, they still can't vote. And that's not true. It doesn't matter if it's a federal conviction. It doesn't matter if it's a conviction in another state. If you're living in Michigan, the fact that you have a felony in your record, you ought to be at the polls because you can vote.
Okay, so in terms of the expungement, let's talk about some of the benefits that people derive from an expungement. Because people are afraid, would you agree with me, to seek out an expungement?
A lot of it has to do with hopelessness. When you have a felony on your record, and it doesn't matter if the felony is 10, 15, 20 years old, and you've done anything since, you are limited in your job opportunities. You are limited in housing opportunities. You are limited in assistance, actually, from the government in terms of being able to receive food and things of this nature. You are reduced to a point where you cannot fend for yourself, and people then become depressed and hopeless. If a person has done their time, whether it's probationary time or if it's incarceration time, they've paid their fine. They should be afforded an opportunity to reestablish themselves into full citizenship. They should be able to get a job. Now, certainly, there are some positions you may not want a person to hold. Somebody convicted of criminal sexual conduct you may not want to have working at the children's center. All right? But someone in Michigan, if you change the number on a temporary license plate, that's a felony. That's a felony. That person may make an excellent teacher. They may make an excellent bus driver. They may make an excellent store clerk. They may know how to do computer programming. That offense may have occurred when they were 18. Now they're 28, 38, 48. And it's blocking them from being able to use their talents, their skills. It's ridiculous.
So if I go out and apply for a job, and it has that box on there, it says, have you ever been convicted of a crime? And you check it, yes. If you're expunged, do you have to check that box?
If it's been expunged, you can check no. You can check no. because it's been set aside, it's been sealed to the public. The records, of course, are always available to the government. The court will always be able to know. The government always has access to that information. But when you are applying for employment opportunities in the private sector, when you're trying to get housing, then you check the no box.
We'll be back shortly, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the court system and how the Supreme Court has helped divide up the courts. Thank you.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
There's been a lot of revamping of the expungement laws, and we're going to just finish this conversation about expungement and move on. But one of the areas that's really bothered me, I don't know if it bothers you, is the fact that if an individual gets charged first offense, count 1, 2, and 3, with 3 felonies, they can't get expunged. Isn't that true?
If you have more than one conviction for a felony, you cannot get expunged. Sometimes, in a single incident, a person may be convicted of 2 counts, is what we call it, 2 counts. That single incident, again, may have occurred 20 years ago. When a person was 17, they may now be 37. They're certainly not the same individual. And so there needs to be some discussion on whether or not a person that is in that scenario, even if they have to wait a little longer before applying, or if you don't want to make it as equal to the other one count, that it needs to be examined. It needs to be examined. It needs to be looked at again. These are our people. These are our citizens. All right, we're not dealing. How do we treat our own? And do we make it more difficult for our own citizens to prosper and to grow? Do we beat our own people down endlessly? And that basically becomes the question: what type of society are we going to be?
Now, I've got an interesting question for you. You sit in the criminal court, correct?
Yes, I do.
You take pleas?
Yes, I do.
Did you ever ask yourself, during the course of taking a plea, if a criminal defendant has a right to know whether the crime that they're pleading guilty to is expungible?
We do discuss it. Sometimes it's sidebar with the counsels. One of the areas of concern right now is that we have people who will be offered an opportunity to plead to HIDA. And that's a program designed specifically for young people. And while they're under supervision, they successfully complete supervision, their record is sealed. They don't even need an expungement. The problem becomes that they have to plead to every count. And being young people, sometimes they still have not fully matured, and they may violate their probation. And if they can violate the probation, doesn't have to be a new crime. the cause of the violation. But if they violate the probation and the hider is taken away, then they have on their record 2, 3, 4 counts. And they're not entitled, under the law as it sits, to an expungement. And so I think it's important that when you're talking to a 17, 18, 19-year-old, and you're saying that you're going to get on this program, but you really do have to successfully complete, because if you don't, you could end up in a situation where you cannot get this set aside, you cannot get this expunged. And it is part of the dialogue that councils are increasingly having with people.
Well, don't you think that the court has a responsibility to explain to a criminal defendant when they're pleading whether the crime that they're pleading to is expungible?
Most of the time, the ones that are not expungible are life offenses and attempt life offenses. You don't get too many pleas on those. Most of those go to trial every now and then. Criminal sexual conduct 1, 2, and 3 are not expungible. Traffic offenses are not expungible. And to be honest with you, people really didn't start talking about expungements until the last 10, 12 years. So in the long range of the law, with each year, people are becoming increasingly aware, which sometimes in itself is frightening, because then you're afraid that the legislatures are going to stop the ability of people to get the expungement because they're more aware. But as time goes on, there's very few offenses that are not expungible.
My point, though, is...
No, I don't.
Okay. Hold on for a second now. We have a plea form.
Yes.
Criminal defendant fills out a plea form.
Yes.
You got to sign it at the bottom.
Yes.
Why can't we add an extra line on there, an extra line that says, do you understand that the crime which you're pleading guilty to is expungible? Check yes or check no.
For 2 reasons. When we go through the list of rights, when we take a plea, those are constitutional rights. An expungement is not a right. It's a privilege. All right? So that's number 1. Number 2, when a person is taking a plea, you may or may not know the extent of their criminal history in terms of other convictions that they may or may not have. So you would be giving advice where you may not be fully informed and would mislead. But the primary reason is that we're talking constitutional rights when a person takes a plea. You have a right to a trial by judge or by jury. You have a right to have an attorney cross-examine any witnesses called against you. You have a right to testify or not testify if you choose not to. Those are constitutional rights.
Now, you're in the criminal court. Supreme Court has also set up other courts in the state of Michigan and the circuits, correct?
Correct.
Okay. They have a business court now.
Yes, they do.
They have a drug court.
Yes.
And today you told me they have a veterans court.
Yes, they do. I helped found the Veterans Court for Wayne County. It's the largest one in the state.
What other courts do they have? They have a civil court, divorce court?
They have the mental health court, and which is sorely needed. I would like to, as I said, a human traffic victims court. I'd like to see that. They are creating a homelessness court in 36th District. They're exploring and creating a court for the homeless. We've always had the family court. We've always had the juvenile court. But these other courts are really what we call treatment courts, where we are trying to assist the individual in addressing a specific problem. So you could be in the criminal division, but what brought you there was drugs. And so if we can treat the substance abuse, we may not send you back again in the criminal division. You may have you may be there because you have mental health issues. If we can stabilize the mental health, then we may not see you again in that division. So these courts that we're talking about now are what we call treatment courts. I like to look at them as restorative courts.
The Michigan Supreme Court gives the lower courts the right to establish these courts. Isn't that true?
That's true.
So it's incumbent upon all of us to vote for individuals who are more sensitive to the social needs of the community.
It is very incumbent because with the cutting of funding, especially with mental health, most people, by the time they reach the courthouse, it's because there is a problem that needs to be addressed. Even when you look at your family court situation, a lot of the divorces are based on substance abuse problems, mental health problems. These still need to be addressed.
They cross all walks of life.
Yes,
though.
they do.
Let's be fair about it. I was in court today and a nurse pled guilty on a drug charge.
Yes.
So here's a woman who has a profession. She has a license. She went to school, had a bachelor's degree. She had a drug charge from taking drugs from her employer. So she has a substance abuse problem that's no different than a street addict, is it?
And a lot of the substance abuse that we are seeing now is abuse of prescription medication. A lot of it starts with overprescribing, and then people can no longer afford it, so then they go to street drugs. Or people sometimes visit the medicine cabinet in the house and take other folks' prescribed medication. A great deal of the addiction that we are seeing has to do with prescribed medication. Another thing, though, we have a new epidemic of heroin in this state, across the country, but we were definitely experiencing it as well in Michigan. And the heroin that is out there now is deadly. It's deadly. And again, we need to be able to treat people, not just lock them up, but to provide treatment so that they can come off of this drug and have productive lives.
So would you say the courts are more sensitive today to the fact that individuals have mental health issues and related drug issues or drinking issues, and treatment plans have to be established instead of incarceration?
I think the circuit court and the district courts are your trial courts. And I believe that the judges who are sitting in those courts and are seeing these problems day after day are increasingly sensitive, that we need to address the issues. Some of the individuals who become judges but have never been in the court, all right, but they still somehow become judges, it may take time for them to become aware. It is not the same adversary process from beginning to end that we were taught 30, 40, 50 years ago. We are more of a social service agency than we have ever been.
On that note, we're going to take a break for a minute. Thank you.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
You know, today I understand that you're very active in human trafficking issues,
Yes.
and it's a very, very serious problem in Michigan.
It's the way that they have measured how intense the problem is. There was a sweep that was done across the country one day, and Michigan had the second highest number of arrests for human trafficking. And people do not necessarily understand that human trafficking covers a wide gamut of activity, but it is very high in Michigan, and it's oftentimes children as young as age 7, 8. And that we need to, first of all, recognize that there is a problem, and then we need to address the problem.
Do you think our socioeconomic situation is a contributing factor to human trafficking?
Human trafficking, let's look at it from both sides, is trafficking human is a very economically sound investment, because you can reuse that commodity over and over and over and over again. And so for those who are the traffickers, it's viewed as a real money maker. Those who get trapped up in it, it's a number of things. Some of it has to do with homelessness among young people. They're put out because they have reached the age of 17 or 18, and whoever was caring for them says the law says you're grown. They kick them out. They don't have any skills. They don't have any place to go. They start off sleeping on somebody's sofa here and there, but they don't have a means of paying rent. And so they find themselves, maybe either by trick or by persuasion, that they begin to sell their bodies. Not keeping all of the product, the proceeds necessarily. Some of it is they are homeless, and people will say, I'll take you in, I can put a roof over your head, I love you. And then as they are become increasingly comfortable, the control increases. Some of it is straight out sales. A family member will sell a child. Okay, sometimes they're tricked. We have, and one thing that our parents need to be so aware of, these cell phones that have computers in them, they have all of these dating lines. Young people go on them and they befriend people. The definition of friend has really changed. And then when they meet up with these individuals, they may never be seen again. They're whisked away. And when they become under the control of the trafficker begins to brainwash. You're no longer a good person. Your parents are not going to want you back after what you've done. Nobody loves you but me now. And they steal the person's self-esteem. And they think they can't go back home, that nobody would receive them with open arms. So it's a wide gamut of tricks and sometimes just pure violence that brings individuals into this lifestyle. But we cannot ignore the fact that it exists and that we need to provide avenues of escape.
Well, drugs are also a contributing factor.
Oftentimes, once a person finds themselves under the control of another human being, one way of maintaining that control is by inducing drugs. And once a person is exposed to the drugs, they develop an addiction. So even if they are no longer being trafficked, for whatever reason, they still have the addiction problem. And so they may use what they are accustomed to continue to feed that addiction problem.
Now, Michigan is the second highest state in the country
Yes.
for human trafficking. Is that true?
That is true. And part of it is just basic geographics. We sit 994 running east and west, a thoroughfare right through, I-75, north and south. We are on an international border just geographically, if you're moving a product, going through Michigan is just open highway. And so that is part of it. And it has spilled over. We have high numbers, not just in the Detroit metropolitan area, but there is a problem in the Kalamazoo area. There is a problem in the Toledo area. And again, it's because of a lot of it increased with the gaming, all right, as well. Another form of entertainment being provided. So we need to be aware, and we need to provide services, and we need to not pretend that it doesn't happen.
What can we do as citizens?
If you see an individual who it seems that there's always someone else hovering over them, they're not allowed to walk away and engage in a free conversation. If you see someone that is battered and bruised, if you see individuals that are living in a house that only one person's allowed to go to the door, the windows are always boarded or caged in, chronic absenteeism among students, things of this nature. Then there is the hotline that you can call for missing children. You can also call your local police and report suspected human trafficking. And sometimes I think, maybe I'm a little biased, it's better to call and be wrong than not call and have been right.
Now, in the house, inside your house, what can you do to ensure that your children aren't enticed through one of these dating online services to make new friends and get involved in these programs? How can you control that?
Awareness would be a good start. To sit down and to explain, to begin early, that everybody that is smiling at you does not necessarily mean they have good intentions. That everybody is not your friend. You should also, to the extent possible, again, it was easier when we had the computers and we could say sit them in the kitchen where everybody could watch. They have the cell phones. There are blocks that you can put on the cell phone to keep out certain types of programs, wordings, things of this nature. Old-fashioned maybe. If you're living in my house, and I'm paying the cell phone bill, and if I'm not, but you're living in my house, you're a young person, you're a minor, I should be able to go through your phone and see what you're looking at. Look at that history. But more importantly, to let your children know that they must be careful. That if they're going to, they should not be meeting strangers alone. They should not be meeting them in places they are not familiar with. They should not be sold on this concept that you're going to become an instant star and somebody you never met is going to take you off to Hollywood. So you need to talk with your children and warn your children and educate your children.
Now, these young people are actually being kidnapped and sold, aren't they?
A lot of them are.
Getting a lot of money for it.
Yes. And the income source is, like I said, it's reoccurring. It's reoccurring. You got that one commodity that you sell over and over again. It's more enriching than the drug dealer. The trafficker makes more money off of their commodity than the drug dealer, because the drug dealer's got to go back and get some more drugs. The trafficker has that same human being and just puts them back out there again.
Now, in terms of what you're doing to eradicate human trafficking, what kind of programs are you involved in?
The first thing that I discovered in wanting to create a treatment court for victims of human trafficking is that there is no coordination of services. There's an agency over here that's providing some of the service. There's another group over there that's providing services. Over on the other side, there's another group. I would like to see established a Wayne County Council for agencies working in human trafficking so that everybody knows where everybody is, what services are being provided, what services are needed but not being provided, so that we can add that to our repertoire of what we supply to victims, and so that we don't over duplicate services and then leave others unmet. If we had a council, then we could meet, even if it was just every other month, to discuss what services are provided, what programs of awareness are going to be given. We could support each other, and we could be more cohesive in the services that we provide. So that's the first thing. We need a coordination of services. We need a county-wide council. Then I would like to educate attorneys and judges on the warning signs of human trafficking, so that when there's someone in the court that displays those signs, that we can design a treatment sentence to meet those needs. There is an effort to educate healthcare providers as to the warning signs. I participated in that project. So that
Could you tell us about that?
If a person comes into the emergency room in need of services for any number of reasons, it could be anything from a physical assault to a disease that has occurred, those people who are working in the emergency room be trained to identify signs of human trafficking and to be able to communicate effectively with the person they believe to be the victim, to try to get additional information, to try to provide them with a safety net even while at the hospital. And so that is another area where we are working right now to try to help people and to build awareness.
Do we have safe houses for people who have been victimized?
In Wayne County right now, there are only 2 and one will accept children basically up at 14 to about age 17, 18. Ideally, Vista Maria has a program. The other one will accept up until about age 22, which is a population that from 17 to 22 is extremely hard to place with homelessness, and provide that type of service, and that would be Matrix. Those are the only 2 I have been able to find. When you start talking about individuals who may be 25, 28, 30, it becomes increasingly difficult to find programs and services. One of the other problems is that there have been reports that the traffickers can be extremely aggressive and may follow the women if they find out where they are, and may try to pull them back into their... Some of the traffickers tattoo the women, all right, so that they know who belongs to them.
So they brand them.
Brand them. How outrageous.
Like they're slaves.
Yes. Cattle.
Yes.
Cattle. And so all of these issues have to be addressed. One of the things that we're looking at is relocating, and I say the women, but there are young men who are victims of trafficking as well. Relocating geographically, maybe sending someone to Minnesota. The person in Minnesota may send somebody to California. We're exploring those options in terms of trying to get someone in a totally different environment with a support system so that they can rebuild their lives.
Are the majority of the individuals who are the victims in human trafficking high school dropouts?
I don't want to say yes, because many of them are not even old enough to have attended high school. That is a problem. That's why we use the missing children's number so often. Some of them may have graduated from high school, but are not just kidnapped, but tricked into meeting people in a location, becoming involved. And human trafficking has impacted suburbia, people living in suburbia. It is not just a poor people's issue, and then primarily because of the telephone, the cell phone with the computer in it.
Let's take a break for a minute. We'll come back and talk a little bit more about this.
Okay.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
You know, oftentimes young people do things that are compromising. Might get involved because of drugs in a relationship that's not appropriate. I'm trying to be respectful about it. And someone's taken a video of them.
Yes.
And they use that, don't they, to blackmail them.
They will, a lot of times, sometimes it could be a party where too much liquor was served. All right, and before you know it, somebody has got a camera, a cell phone camera, they're so plentiful, and they're recording activity that maybe the young person who was not old enough to drink in the first place has engaged in. And then when the young person sobers up, they will say, I've got this video. And if you don't do this, you don't do that, I'm going to show the video. Not just to your parents, but I'm going to put it up and show it to the world.
You're going to go viral with it.
I'm going to go viral. I'm going to go viral just in high school. How about that? And so young people feeling vulnerable, maybe not wanting their parents to know, will go along with, thinking that, okay, if I do this, I give in the one time, then maybe I get the tape. And then they, no, you don't get the tape, now you got to do it again. And it snowballs. And it's been known to happen.
Who should be punished? The trafficker or the person who's the purveyor of the services from the trafficker?
Well, how about both? I think that the person, the customer, if you will, they need to start engaging in this conversation too. I was giving a presentation last week, and one of the men in the audience said, well, they want to sell their bodies. And the women are sitting there. I don't know anybody who, when growing up, put on their list of things that they wanted to be when they grew up, prostitute. All right? And so, I mean, you have to start engaging even those who purchase the services, that this does not have to be a situation that is occurring if the demand was not there. All right?
Okay.
And that maybe you need to consider this is somebody's child, somebody's sister. And this is a dialogue that we had years ago when we first started addressing with aggressiveness domestic violence. We have to talk to all parties in order to reduce domestic violence. We've got to talk to all parties in order to reduce human trafficking. Also, some human trafficking has nothing to do with sex. Some human trafficking has to do with migrant workers, labor, physical labor for which people are not paid or not adequately paid, salons, fingernail salons, things of this nature. So it's a number of services that are involved, and so we have to keep an open mind, and we have to have an honest perspective that people are entitled to be compensated fairly for their labor, They should not be forced into labor. And so we have to keep an open mind and discuss it openly.
Hey, let me give you an example. Somebody's out along the expressway. They have a sign that says they're homeless. They're trying to get some money. Person comes by with a car and says, "Come on, I'll give you a ride." He says, "Come on, live with me." Next thing, they've got him cleaning the house. Next thing, they've got him cleaning the neighbor's house. Couple neighbors' homes. They should be paid for doing that if they're going to be there.
They should. They should.
And that's a big issue.
It is an issue. And I've given a couple of forums, and I basically have said that human trafficking is slavery. And people go aghast. How could she say that? And it's not politically correct. But people don't move until they are uncomfortable. And so you need to make people a little uncomfortable by not being so politically correct. Oh, it's human trafficking. No, it's slavery.
The same thing holds true if you bring somebody home to take care of your child and you don't pay them.
A live-in nanny who's not allowed to leave the house. Or if they leave the house, they can only leave the house with another adult who is constantly watching and monitoring where they're going, who they're talking to, is another example of human trafficking.
And these are serious problems that we haven't really addressed, have we?
We have not. We have not.
Now, one of the other areas in human trafficking is young males are being caught up because of their sexual preferences, and there's shame associated with the fact of their alternate lives. Isn't that true?
It's not necessarily their shame. Sometimes it's their parents who are ashamed.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about their shame. They can't come out at home.
Their parents, sometimes the parents, there are a number of cases where they have been kicked out of the house because the parents are not willing to accept their lifestyle. And then when they are kicked out of the house as young adults, then they have to find somewhere to live. And then they are approached by individuals. I will provide you with some place to live. Come stay with me. And then they are too often victimized by the person offering the shelter. They can sometimes, in going from house to house, are victimized. And if they're young people, again, there's such a limited number of safe places for young teenagers and adults. It is just sad. It is just sad.
Now, these forums that you're having to discuss these issues, where are they being held?
In a number of places. We've had them at libraries, union halls, lodges, Elk, Moose, Mason. We have them at different lodges. We do the forums on a number of topics. We do the expungement. We do firearm laws and safety, where we have been giving out trigger locks. We don't advocate, we educate. We give you the information. You do with it what you think you ought to do. We do them on human trafficking. We've done them on the American Disabilities Act for the disabilities community. So we give a number of forums, and we always, because it's always volunteer, everyone in Proud is a volunteer. We just ask that the community group or organization provides a free location and will assist in getting the word out to the community that the forum is being held, so we don't travel 50, 60 miles and we get there and there's only 3 people in a room. All right?
How do we find your group to do this? If I want to have a program, how do I find you?
You can go on JudgeDeborahThomas.com. That's DeBorah. JudgeDeborahThomas.com. And from there, you will be able to place your request, and we will get back to you, and we will do our best to attend, to set up the forum and help bring the information.
Now, when you set up a forum, like if you say you're going to set up a forum in Kalamazoo,
Yes.
you try and get local people in the community to participate with you, don't you?
Most definitely. I have, and Kalamazoo, it's funny you mentioned it. I do have 2 people right now who are working with their Minority Bar Association, and they're Young People's Bar Association, the new lawyers. And they are putting together a forum on expungement. So, and then I have another group that's in the Port Huron area. They are planning an expungement forum, and also another group in the Port Huron is planning to do a forum on human trafficking, looking at the Blue Water Bridge.
Well, that's a very important area because of the close proximity.
Yes, and all the focus has been on the Ambassador Bridge. I said, well, shoot, if I was in the human trafficking, everybody looking at the Ambassador Bridge, I'd go Blue Water. And it's like, oh, we hadn't thought of that. Makes sense. And so that's another area where we're going. We have done forums on the firearm safety in Detroit. We've done one in Battle Creek. I've given away over 600 safety trigger locks in the last 2 years. So there's a number of topics that we do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming today, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
I hope you get the nomination.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thanks for listening today to Law Power Hour. Stay cool. We'll see you next week.